Welcome to a new video. Let's take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. The first story is called Don't Want to Be Disturbed. I work on the railway as a guard. My job involves checking and selling tickets, giving people travel information and advice. And, most importantly, keeping them safe and looking after them if there's an emergency. Sometimes this means telling them off if they've got their feet on the seats as well. I was working a train down from London one afternoon. I was checking tickets and trying to be helpful. Then I came across a gentleman in an otherwise empty coach who had his set on the seats and massive noise-cancelling headphones on his head. I asked if I could see his ticket and if he'd be so kind as to remove his feet. But of course, he couldn't hear me. I asked again, slightly louder, and again, he ignored me. I took my carriage key and used it to rap upon the window, creating a loud and clear knocking sound that normal cuts through headphones and sleep alike, but even this did nothing. So, the final resort, I took a firm grasp on the back of his seat and gave it a shake. This was enough to get his attention. "Good afternoon, sir," said I. "Tickets, please? And would you mind keeping your feet off the seats? What do you think gives you the right to disturb me?" He said. "Well, sir, it's my job to check your tickets. So if you'd be so good as to show me yours, I'll be happy to leave you alone. But I still need you to take your feet off the seats." "Get lost, you Jobsworth," he said, while getting out his ticket. "I don't want to be disturbed again, do you understand?" "Absolutely, sir, but please, take your feet off the seats. Or how about we put a newspaper down first? Or you could take off your shoes, perhaps?" Grumbling, he found an old newspaper and spread it out on the seat opposite before placing his still-be-shoed feet back up. "Also, sir," I said, "it might be a good idea to turn your headphones down a tad. Otherwise, you might not hear important announcements. I've made it quite clear that I don't want to talk to you. Now get lost." Now, one of the key skills in my job is knowing when to pick your battles. And I had no desire to make more work for myself by dealing with this gentleman. So I got lost. A few minutes later, I had a call from control, letting me know that due to a signaling issue further down the line, my train was going to be diverted just after our next stop. As a result, we would be missing out about 90% of the stations that we had been due to call at, and would be running directly to our final destination. I called up my driver to let him know about the change in plan and then made an announcement to my passengers. "Good afternoon, everyone. This is your guard speaking. I have just received word from control that, due to a signaling issue at Station B, this train will now be diverted between Station A and Station G, and will no longer be calling at Station B, Station C, Station D, Station E, and Station F, and will instead be running fast directly to Station G. Any passengers for Stations B, C, D, E, or F should change at Station A. If you have any questions, I'll be walking through the train. Please do not hesitate to ask. Thank you." And so I walked through the train, talking to the passengers, making sure that they all understood what was going on, and where they would now need to change in order to get to where they were going. Some of them were understandably annoyed, but I did my best to explain it all to them and to let them know that it was beyond our control. By the time I had walked through the train, every single passenger knew exactly what they needed to. Well, all the passengers but one. We arrived at Station A, and quite a lot of people got off. I had an 8-coach train, and now only about 20 or so passengers, so it was nice and quiet. I made one last announcement about the diversion, then shut the doors, and gave the driver 2 on the bell, the signal that we were ready to start. I happened to be in the same coach as the gentleman from earlier, who now had his eyes open, and was looking out of the window. I watched him as he watched the world slide by as we pulled out of the station, and I watched him as he felt us bounce over a set of points that we would not normally have crossed over. I watched him as he began to realize that the view out of the window was wrong and that we had gone down a different line to usual. And I watched him as we started to zip past stations that he had clearly never seen before. As we took the diversion down to Station G after a few minutes, he walked up to where I was sitting in my little guard's office and asked me what time we were due to arrive at Station B. "Well, as I said in the announcements, we're not going Station B anymore. We're running non-stop to Station G. I did make plenty of announcements about it." "Well, I didn't hear anything." "Why didn't you tell me?" he shouted. "You made it perfectly clear that you didn't want me to disturb you, sir," I said, "and I had warned you about being able to hear the announcements." "Well, I need to get to Station B. How am I going to get there now?" This was perfect. This was the moment that I had been waiting for. I explained to him that he was now going to have to stay on this train until we got to Station G, wait around for half an hour or so, get another train from Station G to Station A, wait some more, and then get a bus from Station A to Station B. "How long is that going to take?" he asked. "Well," I said, "from Station A to Station G, along with the diversion, is about an hour and a half each way, plus the waiting. So if the buses are good, about 4 hours or so, give or take." Well, needless to say, he was not happy about this. But there was nothing that I was able to do to help him out. And after all, he had made it clear that he did not want me to disturb him. The next story is called, Causing Managers to Reassess Priorities. Some years ago, in the early 2000s, I worked at a call center for a major self-storage company. It was an excellent job in many ways, the pay was reasonable, the job came with opportunities for promotion, and if you showed specific skills or talents, you'd often get a chance to apply them. My talents run to customer service, problem solving, diplomacy, and writing. So I was placed on what they called the support desk. I would handle calls from property managers and customers all across the country when a reservation went awry for any reason whatsoever. Not to boast, but rather to make clear my value to the company in this role, I won an award at the annual company party for my performance after only 6 months on that job. Unfortunately, about a year after I took on the assignment, I found myself facing a major mental health crisis, and turned in my 2 weeks' notice. A year later, I reapplied for my old job, but there was no opening on support staff, so they assigned me to sales until a slot opened up. Fine. I was grateful for the work, and they would still occasionally pull me off of the phone to help with administrative duties or to assist with tricky reservation issues. So I wasn't just maddeningly repeating the same script all day. Problem was, the operations manager for the center had quit in disgust when his boss got in his face over some minor charges on an expense report for a business trip. This man had been a genius at his job, letting people go early on some days, and calling in those favors for overtime when there weren't enough people signing up for it. His replacement was nice, but in over her head, and our numbers of dropped calls had increased while she learned the ropes. Additionally, one of the supervisors in charge of compliance was going through something in his personal life and had started taking it out on the workers in increasingly petty ways. My new supervisor would never stand up to him. It had become an unpleasant working environment, not quite toxic, but headed in that direction. During the summer months, we experienced crunch time, when we received an enormously high volume of calls. The kids are out of school, so that's when most families move. This meant a certain number of perks to increase morale. Free lunches from local casual dining places, mildly annoying themed days, and a relaxing of the office's business casual dress code. One night, going home at the end of my shift, I saw notices being posted. I didn't bother reading them, as I was exhausted from being slammed with calls on top of the other duties I was given that day. I returned the following day wearing black jeans and saw that crunch time was officially over, meaning that we were back to normal. We were, however, still getting an enormously high call volume, so I sat at my cubicle and put in my earpiece. After 1 hour, I was tapped on the shoulder by my immediate supervisor and told to get off of the phones. The compliance manager has noticed that I'm wearing jeans, and is insisting that I go home to change, then come back to work. Can't I just get a verbal warning or something? We're getting a heavy call volume. No luck. The compliance manager insists. Fine. Thing is, I don't have a car. I ride the bus. I ride the bus in Los Angeles, where service is improving, but at the time was notoriously inconsistent and shoddy. I don't bother informing them of this. Instead, I wait for the bus for about 45 minutes, then take a ride of slightly over an hour to get home. When I get there, I find a pair of pants on my floor that I've worn once, and would undoubtedly pass muster if I were to wear them back to work. However, the company dress code states that all items of apparel must be clean, so I decide to wash them. Unfortunately, it turns out that both our washer and our dryer are occupied by another roommate. I could explain to him that this is an emergency. But instead, I let him do all of his laundry uninterrupted. My phone rings. It's my supervisor. I explain the situation. We need you back in here now. Our team is getting slammed, and we're dropping calls because we're not fully staffed. I re-explain the situation, and also state that as I ride the bus, there's no way that I could realistically be back before 2 hours were up. He tells me to take a taxi. I ask him if the company will reimburse me. He says no. I tell him that a 12-mile cab ride isn't in my budget and that I'll do my best. He tells me that this is unacceptable. I remind him that I was willing to take a warning in order to be able to stay at my desk, and that I'm not going into work in dirty pants, or I'm going to run the risk of being sent home again. My roommate finishes. I wash the pants along with the rest of my laundry. I then dry them, take each item out separately, fold them, take a shower, change into my business casual clothes, and make it back to work. With 30 minutes left on my shift. The next day, I'm called into the office of the sales supervisor. Both my immediate supervisor and the compliance manager are there. I'm handed a written warning, the second most serious disciplinary action, for missing work without permission. I yet again explain the sequence of events and stress that I initially asked to stay at work, and was willing to have a verbal warning on my record for the clothing issue. She asks my immediate supervisor if this was the case. He, to his credit, says yes, but that they were trying to make a point to other sales staff. She asks me to go back to my desk, and to close the door behind me. Shortly afterward, I see the vice president in charge of the call center head towards her office. The four of them remain behind closed doors for some time. The next day, I'm informed that my written warning has been downgraded to a verbal one, and I'm reminded to check all notices before leaving for the day. I agree to do so, as that was careless on my part. Word then goes out that minor first-time dress code violators will be subject to a verbal warning, but are expected to stay at work, especially during heavy call periods. I later found out that after I had been sent home, 2 other people on our team also had to leave, one for a medical emergency, the other for a family issue. And we'd had our worst call retention numbers since my immediate supervisor had been placed in charge of a team. Also, the operations manager was in some hot water for not staffing that shift sufficiently. The last story is called "Picking My Own Airline to Fly." So, as a federal employee, when we fly, we have to book our plane tickets with the locally contracted airline. However, our union agreement and other federal travel guidelines state an employee can fly any airline of their choice, as long as the price is equal to or cheaper than the contracted airline. My first 2 training trips to the Midwest, I flew with Airline Z because I've been a frequent flyer with them for over 15 years. They offer plenty of legroom, their planes are newer and bigger, and seats are wide enough to be comfortable. The first 2 trips, their price was cheaper than the contracted airline. I made my orders, booked my tickets with Airline Z, and everything was approved. Easy done. Then, it wasn't. July 2017, it was going to be my 3rd trip to the Midwest. I did my orders, booked my flight with Airline Z as the price was slightly cheaper than the contracted airline price, and so I figured, who doesn't want to save money, and sent everything for approval. Well, the new approving manager denied my orders. I called her and asked why were my orders denied? She said, "You didn't book your ticket with the contracted airline." I explained that I've flown with 2 other times with Airline Z, the price had always been cheaper than the contracted airline, and per the union agreement, my orders shouldn't have been denied. She goes on to say, "Well, I wouldn't have approved them then and I'm not approving them now. Redo your orders." Okay, so I redid my orders with the contracted airline. Again, the price was slightly higher than Airline Z, but I do what I am told. When I arrived at the gate, I noticed the plane that the contracted airline was using was smaller than Airline Z. I was hoping it was not as cramped as it looked, but sure enough, when I got in, it immediately felt cramped. At 6'1", my head was a few inches from hitting the roof of the plane. And being slightly bulky, the seat I sat in was narrow and extremely uncomfortable. If I raised the armrests, my thighs spilled over to the other passengers' comfort zone. Thank God the seat beside me was empty for this trip. My knees were literally hitting the seat of the passenger in front of me. I somehow managed to grab my phone out of my pocket and take a picture of my legs and knees and showed how cramped and uncomfortable I was. It was the longest 3-hour flight ever. As for the return flight, it was the same circumstance as the departure flight, except I had someone next to me who was also slightly bulky. I pulled out my phone again and painfully took another picture. I discreetly added the passenger's size next to me to add to my discomfort flight. October 2017 comes around and I'm heading to training again, and once again, I had to book with the contracted airline. And the same thing happens: cramped seats, hurting knees, a bulky passenger next to me. And this time, the passenger in front of me leaned back on her seat mid-flight. With my phone at the ready, I took another picture of my horrible circumstance. My caption would have been, "This is how a sardine feels." On the return home, I paid for the emergency row, out of pocket. Booking the emergency exit row was an extra cost that wasn't allowed on government credit cards. It's after Thanksgiving 2017, and I get advised I'm going back to the Midwest for more training. This time I'm ready. I had done a little research on the federal travel guidelines and saw that business class was an option for air travel if the reason to book business class was for safety and health reasons. Bingo. I created my orders, and this time, I booked a business class with the contracted airline and included my health as an exceptional reason. The total price was almost 3x the normal expense for this type of trip. I submitted my orders for approval, and not even a minute passes when the approval manager calls me. I answered the phone. I didn't even get a chance to say hello. "Why are you booking a business class?" "Because of the contracted airline, I don't fit in the normal seats." "That's not a good enough reason. You need to change the class now, or I am not approving these at all." "No, it's a health issue. I need a business class to sit comfortably. My legs and thighs cramp up and my knees hurt from banging the seat in front of me. I am not approving that. I'm coming over there and we're going to meet with your manager right now." He hung up. I was ready for this. I got my phone and walked to my manager's office. He's on the phone, so I quietly sit down and did not say anything. He gets off the phone and then looks at and asks, "What's up?" I smile and shake my head when it comes to the approval manager. Glad you're here. He wants to book business class for his training trip. You know, you can't do that. Why did you? I pulled out my phone. Remember my trip in July? Well, here's my first experience with the contracted airline heading to training. I give my manager my phone and he raises his eyebrows in disbelief. The approval manager didn't look at the photo. That is not the government's problem. Okay, my manager hands me back my phone. Well, here's a picture from the return trip and it was more uncomfortable than the outbound trip. I couldn't get settled the entire trip. My thighs and legs cramped a bit. I showed my manager my phone again and he cringes. The approval manager is still unfazed. Your comfort is not our concern. We just need to get you there and that's it. And finally, got my phone back and showed him the October trip. This happens on my last trip, which left my right thigh in pain for a few days, my lower back ache while sitting in training, which made it uncomfortable to learn or study the material. Not to mention the sore knees I had from bumping into the seat in front of me, again. I showed my manager the sardine picture and he made the face like he just swallowed a lemon. I really do cramp up in those seats. I can't sit or stand up comfortably. I'm in the next passenger's personal space, and I cannot really adjust my knees or legs at all during the flight. If I get hurt really bad where I can barely walk, I might have to miss a day or two in training class. Therefore, for health reasons, I need a business class on the contracted airline. Well, that ain't gonna happen because I am not approving them. You need to change it back to the coach. You've done coach before with the contracted airlines, you can do it again. My manager just looks at her for a minute. For him being a big guy himself, he knew my pain. He said, well, I think you should approve his orders. But I understand if you don't want to. He's provided me with enough info here to get a health exception. I can't have him miss training due to an injury because of cramped seats. If I have to, I'll have him send his orders to your manager for approval. Of course, I'm also gonna send him a quick email with those pictures to back up the health exception. Do you mind sending me those pictures to my email? Sure. I send it to him directly. Thank you. He's quiet for a minute until he turns back to approval manager. What would have been the alternative to flying the contracted airline? There is none. We have to fly the contracting airline. I'm staying quiet because it is no longer my fight. Are you positive on that? Yes. 100%. Then I guess we have to book him business class. And he turns to his computer to start typing something. The approval manager though doesn't want to admit defeat, especially to her own boss. Wait. She says with one arm stretched out trying to get my manager to stop typing, which he does. You know, he could fly coach with Airline Z. That's an alternative. The approval manager is now trying to save face now, but my manager isn't buying it. Are the tickets the same price as the contracted airline? I did a quick internet search on my phone, which by the way is not the way you research official travel prices. You must use the governance search engine and the approval manager should have caught this. But she did not. No sir, all prices are up really high now. The approval manager is mad, knowing that she has lost completely. So, before I finish my email and send it off to your manager, will you approve his orders? She nods like a spoiled child and she walks out of the office. I thank my manager and left to resend my orders to her with business class for my November training. By the way, it wasn't much difference, except for wider seats, more legroom, my knees didn't touch the seat in front of me, and free drinks. January 2018 comes around and I get another training class. Except for this time, I got approved to fly with Airline Z from the approval manager. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content. Let me know what you think about the stories in the comment section below. Have a great day. Bye bye.